Yeah. Someone was asking a question. So it was about the shadow, right? If I got you before the call ended.
Yeah, the shadow.
Okay, cool. So let me just share my screen again. Okay. So let me move to a different thing. So the bit of the shadow is let me just create. So we created a bar, like a rectangle. It can be anything. Right? So once you create this, you come to the right section. So you see effects. Right. So when you click on the effect or you click on the plus, by default it selects drop shadow. Right. There are other effects, but this is what we are using now. So drop shadow. When you click on this, it gives you the option to edit. So it has the X and the Y. By default, you notice is Y, and this is the Y is 4. Right. So if I even increase it to 40, you notice that it comes down more. You get it. If I make it 90 on the x-axis, it goes to the right. If I make it negative, it will go to the left. If I make the y negative, it will go on top. You get it. Then this blur is more of the softness. So you want to blur this. Right. So if I currently is 4, if I make it, let's say 50, you see that it has this blur stuff or effect on it. I can continue to increase it and all. So we played around this. There's also the spread, right? So also, this is how wide it will go. Okay, this is 440, it's too much. I can make it 4. Okay, the video is done, sorry. So I mostly don't use the spread, but it depends on how you want your shadow blur to look like, right? So it depends on the effect. In our case, on Pinterest, you notice there's this white, if you zoom in, you notice there's this white effect. So it feels as though the yellow bar is on top of the images. You get it? And it has this smooth transition. Yeah. So one way we can do it is we apply a shadow on the bar. So let me move everything to 0. So now we want the shadow to be on top, right? Let me reduce this. So we take the y-axis and make it negative. So make it 50. And this is opacity, which is the basic one. You can keep it to 100. So let me do it right so that. So I've made it red and the opacity is 100 and it's minus 50. So it's at the top on the y-axis, right? Then I think we made ours 40. Let me make it 40. Then the blur, I made it, I think 50. So it gives this effect, right? But we want to use white. So when we do white, that is FF, then we reduce the opacity. You don't see this. Let me change the frame colors. Now you actually see the white. So, so you see the white, you can reduce the opacity to, let's say, 25. So it gives this effect. So this is what we took and we came to apply here. So if you look at this yellow bar, it has a drop shadow effect. Then the background is FFF, which is white. We made it 100% minus 40 so that it comes to the top here. The blur is 50. I don't know if you get it now. Please, you get it now.
Yeah, I guess it's sensible.
There are other ways someone will want to do it. So let me quickly show you another way you can apply that effect. So let's say, let me remove this shadow effect on the rectangle. So now you see that it doesn't have. Now I'm going to draw a rectangle to fill the whole page. Right. Then I'll make this, change it to linear. This is this gradient effect, right? So this, I want this to be transparent. So if you come here, you can just reduce the opacity based on the, I mostly use HSL. But if yours is on hex, you can just come to this 100% and reduce it to 0, right? Or you can just drag this thing to 0. So now it's 0. Then this section, the one at the bottom. So there are two. There's one at the top and there's one at the bottom. So when you click on the one at the top, you notice that this is selected. Then the opacity is 0. So I'll click the one at the bottom. I want it to have some opacity. So you see this effect. So it's like the color transition. So it's from white and it just fades out. Or I think this is gray. Let me just make it white. So it's from white and it fades out. If you want it to fade out early, you can just click this thing and bring it down. You get it? So now I've gotten this effect. I've got this thing to fade out like at this section. You get it? Or if you want it to take in at this area too, you can just bring the one that has opacity 100. You can just bring it on top. So now that is our rectangle. So you see it's rectangle 7. Let me call it overlay. So overlay. So now I have to bring this rectangle behind the what's the name? Our yellow distance. So I can click on it and just drag it. So our yellow distance is called rectangle 5. Let me call it yellow bar. So you see now, oops. So now that I've taken it back, so now you can see our rectangle here. Then now that effect is it, but the effect is on the whole page, right? So there are so many ways to achieve the same thing. So once you understand the basic, it's easy to play around these ones, right? Okay, someone is clapping. Okay, yes, that's clapping. All right. So yeah, so that's another way to do it. So you can also explore ways you may want to achieve it. Right. So if you're all good, if there are no further questions, we can move on to the next section, which is designing for web. So wait, let me just hold on for a second if there are any questions. Okay, if there's nothing, okay, we can go ahead. So the next section, sorry, was anyone saying something? I heard a sound.
Yeah, I wanted to ask this. Maybe you get there later. I don't know. You see, when we enter the prototyping, after everything, you can see that your your design will be on either the phone interface or a laptop interface. It depends on the device that you pick. For that
Yeah,
one, how do you save that one for it to appear on the whether laptop or phone device, any of the device that you pick? How do you save the prototype?
exactly. So that's where we are going. So designing for web, right? So that's a good question. I don't want to say it's a tricky thing, but now there are so many devices and the various devices have different screen sizes, right? So if you even take this Pinterest website, when you view it on your phone, it will look different, right? When you view it on a laptop, it will look different. Even on laptops, based on your laptop screen or your resolution, you notice that these images, some are very close to the edge, some are not so close to the edge. I don't know if you noticed it. You can even check from some of the screenshots that were shared. Right. So all these things you need, as a designer, you need to be mindful of it because you are designing for people who are going to use different screens. So you design a website, then you notice that people are using their phones to actually access the website because they have a browser, Chrome or whatever they are using, Safari or whatever they are using, right? And you want to design your website such that if the person is even using their mobile phone, they should still like find things, or the website should still look good. You get it? They should be able to find their way around it and all those stuff. So those are some of the things you need to consider when you are designing for web. right? A typical example is our very own, I think I could go to Pinterest, right? So when I come to Pinterest here, sorry, it's refreshing. Okay. So when I come to Pinterest here, you notice that this is how my page looks like, right? Everything is quite big and all those stuff because I have a bigger screen. I'm using a 16-inch PC, right? So one thing I also do is you can come here, you right click, then you click on inspect, right? When you click on inspect, the browsers actually give you the option to switch your screen size, or if you can even do this. You notice when my screen was wide, there was quite a space, like a huge space at the far right of the images. But when I start squeezing it, you will see that the page will start adjusting. So now you see the number of images that are in view, right? You notice that some of the images have cut. You notice that everything starts adjusting. You get it. So these are some of the things you when you are designing for web, or when you're designing for the web, because people can access the web from their mobile phones or laptops. And there's this feature here, so toggle device toolbar. When you click on it, right, it gives you, let me refresh the page again so that you see it better. So it will give you, they allow you to view, the browser allows you to view a page, a web page from any device. So they give you some prominent devices that you can easily switch. So right now I've switched to Pixel 5. So this is how the browser will, or this is how the web page will look on the phone. You see, because it's a phone, they are not showing me these images. And this is the first thing they are showing me, because maybe it will be difficult to maybe implement this on the mobile. It may not be user-friendly. So this is what they are showing me. If you open Pinterest on your mobile phone, you are likely to see this page. When you scroll, you see the other sections and all. But this is how everything has been laid out. So you see how they do it. So when you are designing, you should, and mostly for web, you need to consider your screen sizes, because things may look differently, or things may have to look different on the desktop. Things may have to look different on an iPad. Things may have to look different on a mobile, right? So even notice if I switch the devices, everything starts getting wide and all those stuff. You get it? So you can try this on your own. When you go to a web page, or if you have your laptop and your phone with you, you can visit some website and you look at it on your phone. You notice that they have different layout. There's this concept called responsive design, right? So there's this concept called responsive design. So that is what helps both designers and developers to design stuff for various screens. So they have adaptive and we have responsive, right? So with adaptive, you, the designer, I think even it will be the same thing. Even let's say the developer, right? The developer will have to implement this layout, right? They have to implement a layout for a bigger screen, which is maybe a laptop. Then they also have to do a different layout for a mobile screen. So if I take, let's say, like a typical example is the Pinterest, right? You notice on the Pinterest, when it was the web, they were showing us these images, but when it was mobile, they switched to show us the, I don't know how they even call that thing. Let's switch and refresh. They showed us this page first. Let me take a screenshot so I can refer to it anytime. Right. So they showed us this page first on mobile. So you can say that this is what they are showing us. So on web, they are showing us this. On mobile, they are showing us this. So they've designed specific screens or layout for each screen size. Right. So this is what you call an adaptive design. So for each screen sizes, they've done different layouts. So then the difference is like they have different layout or unique layout for each screen size. And so that's for adaptive design. But for responsive design, they use only one layout, but they adjust the components based on your screen size. So if you go to some web pages, when you start reducing the screen size and all, you see that the image, maybe they'll remove this section and they'll maintain just one section. I think even Pinterest was doing that, right? But to confirm, I just confirmed from my phone, they're actually using the adaptive. So if I'm doing designing for mobile, I can do this, reduce the sizes of everything here, right? Come and copy all this and maybe paste it here. This may not be perfect, but I'm just using this to show you how some of the things like. Right. So you can say that this, so this is a responsive layout because it is the same layout, but based on the various screen sizes, they are adjusting things. So based on the screen size, I reduce the text, the font text, I reduce it small. Then the images too, I reduce it or maybe maintain the based on if I think this size is good for mobile, I can maintain it. Right? So this is a responsive layout and this is an adaptive layout. So this one, you say that for a specific screen size, we change the layout for it, right? And this one for a specific layout, or for each screen size, we adjust the layout. So we are just using one layout, but for each screen size, we will adjust it. Maybe we will move certain things, maybe we will reduce the size of certain things, right? But for adaptive, it is a different layout. It's not the same layout, it is different. I don't know if we all understand this. I would appreciate if you understand it, you can just give a thumbs up. It would be good to understand this before we continue. So if you understand it, you can just indicate that, yeah, I understand this. A thumbs up or so we are 7 on the call. Okay, Jonathan, just to be sure if I have to, Jonathan and okay. Looks like everybody has. Okay, cool. So yeah, so these are some of the things when we are going to web design or when you are designing for the web, these are some of the things you also want to consider. So one thing that has really gotten, I'll say is quite popular is this, because the adaptive layout or design, it takes time, right? That means if you are the designer, you have to now go and design different layouts for different screens. Maybe if it's an iPad, maybe it's a different thing that will show, right? So most teams tend to go with the responsive layout. So it is one design, right? Then they try and adjust it for other screen sizes. So if it's mobile, we can't show all the images, all the columns, like the images in the columns. So maybe we only show 3, right? So this one, we are just adjusting the same layout for each screen. So most teams tend to go with this layout. You get it. So another example is, I had my Facebook opened, right? So if I go into Facebook, let me take this. If I go into my Facebook here, right? So I notice that the page is wide. They have some section here, they have some section here. So if I inspect the page, notice that when I squeeze or start reducing the size, you notice that this bar has come. So they've collapsed all the things that were here, right? And they've removed the text and they only maintained the icons, right? So if you pay attention to it, you see the text is there and the icons is there. So when I start reducing the size, you notice that they just left the icons here. So it's the same layout, right? But they're just adjusting it based on the screen size, right? The same Facebook they are doing both the responsive and the adaptive layout. If you look at the URL, you see that it is web.facebook, right? So this is the web interface, but they have an adaptive layout for mobile. So I changed so if you notice this, even if I reduce this same page, right? If I reduce it further, if I reduce this further, this is how it looks. They remove the white space, they remove all this section. So because it's a smaller screen, they are removing it. But note that this is the URL is web, right? Facebook also has a web page, but this one they call it mobile.facebook. Right. So with this mobile.facebook, whether you do it, that layout is purposely for mobile. So this is how it looks. Even if you increase the width, it will give you a mobile this layout. So you see how this is. It doesn't look good because this is purposely for mobile. So if you look at the URL, so they have, you can see that they are implementing both adaptive and responsive layout. So this one for web.facebook, they are doing it responsive. So based on your screen size, it will change. So people have smaller screen sizes, people have bigger screen size or resolution. So based on that, it will adjust. But if they see that you are accessing Facebook from your mobile phone and it takes you to mobile.facebook, the layout is fixed. So that layout has been designed purposely for smaller screens. So this is how it's supposed to look like. You get it? So this is another example. I hope I've not confused you. Okay, so there's a site called Material Design or Material Design. So it's a design system, right? So we know Google has like a lot of products. So there's the Gmail, there is Google Docs, there's Google Sheets, like there's a lot, Google Drive and all those stuff, right? And it's all for it's all for Google, sorry. And somehow they need to keep certain things consistent, like buttons. So a button on Gmail or in Gmail should look the same as a button in maybe Google Calendar or Google Drive, right? So there's this thing called design system that kind of governs these things. So I will share a link. I don't want to go into design systems now because it's a whole conversation. There's a difference between design systems and style guide, right? But I'll focus on designing for web. So I want us to look at some of the components that make up web designs, right? So they have buttons. So if you come into they have components. When you come to components, they have a list of components from badges and all those stuff. But I want us to look at buttons, right? So as a designer, because you'll be designing for web platforms, so whether it's for mobile or when I say web, even if you're using mobile, maybe you're using a browser. So for smaller screens and all those stuff or bigger screens, you want to know how things work on the web. You don't necessarily have to know how to code, right? But you have to know how the things work because you're going to design for the developer to implement your designs. You get it? And a user is going to interact with the things that you design or the things that you code or you implement, right? So you need to understand how these things work. So a button in the browser or a button on the web, how does it work, right? So we can take Google Design System because they have a nice documentation. They explain to you the types of buttons they use, when to use it, and how the buttons work, right? So for Google, they have a number of buttons. They have about 5. So it's called elevated button, filled button, filled. So now we can go into the details later. But if you look here, you can see like the difference. The elevated has like some shadow to it. The filled has like a strong background to it. Then this toner has like a shade of this green as the background. Outline it doesn't really have a background color, but the border has like a color. And the text is just text. It doesn't really have a background fill whatsoever. So these are the types of buttons Google uses, right? If you scroll down, they tell you like they give you a breakdown. So that is what we want to focus on. So the specs, right? So you notice that a typical background that is they call elevated background has a shadow, it has a text, right? Or the background they call it container, right? So that's one. It has a container, it has a label, it also has icons. Some of them have icons. So just as we designed the Pinterest, right? So we'll say the red rectangle that has curved corners is our container. and this is our text. Because with our button didn't have an icon, we don't have an icon here, right? So these are some of the things. You don't have to bother about this at the moment. It can get a bit confusing, but you can just look at the design attributes. So it has color, it has shadow, it has a surface tint and all the stuff. So this is the container we are talking about. This is the label text, and this is the icon. Right. So if you look at all the Google products, all the Google apps, from Calendar, Google Gmail, Google Drive, Google Docs, and all, they have they are supposed to have that consistent design. So this is how they use their buttons. One thing I like about the Google design system is they explain to you how the things work. So for example, a button or elevator button, buttons have states, right? So they have interactive states, such that if someone sees the button, they know, okay, this is a button. So you as a designer, when you are designing a button, at least you should try and design the button such that when a user sees it, they know that, okay, this is a button, I can click on it, right? So these are some of the things. So buttons have enabled state, they have disabled state, they have hover state, they have focus state, and they have press state. Right. So sometimes it's good to know, not even sometimes, it's good to know this. It makes you stand out as a designer so that you don't have issues where the developer will say, this designer is going to design something that I don't even understand. Like, it doesn't make sense to me, because the developers, they also do these things. So they are forced to understand how buttons work, right? And if you're a designer, you are designing websites or web apps, you should also know the components that make up these websites or the web apps. You get it? So buttons have states. So if you notice here, these are like the five popular states. So enabled, or the default state, disabled, hovered, focused, and pressed. So let me go to a typical website. Let me go to Pinterest. Let me close on this. Okay. So you notice that even there's a button here. Let me just refresh. Let me zoom into the login button. So this, right? So you notice that when I bring my cursor, this is my cursor. When I bring it over the login, see that the color changes. It gives me a dark and red, right? So, and when I bring it, you notice that the cursor also changes. The cursor changes to a pointer. I've not clicked though, I've just brought my cursor on top of the login. So this gives you that, this is what we call hover. So when you hover on it, it lets you know that, okay, this thing is clickable. You notice that the cursor has also changed. So it informs the user that, oh, this thing, I can click on it. You get it? So this state where the button's background color has changed is called hover state. Right. So that is what Material has stated here. That's what they are calling the hover state. Right. So hover state. And we have disabled. Right. So disabled, you can't click on the button, right? Then we have focused. So let me see if I can also illustrate the focus state. So the focus state is something like this. Or when you probably have the button in focus, sometimes some people use pressed to illustrate it. So when you click, I've clicked, I'm still holding on to it, right? There's a focus state, right? So that's the focus state for some button. There's some input, like something like an input field. The input field also has a focus state, right? So maybe you've interacted with it, or you're interacting with that component. So you are focusing on that specific component. So some components have focus state, right? And then the next one is pressed, right? So that was the one I illustrated. So pressed and focus, sometimes they are similar based on your design style or the system, right? So you notice for what's the name? Oof, so scrolling. For Pinterest, the focus state, the press state, when I click on, let me zoom so that you can see it clearly. When I click on it, right, you see that the layout changes a bit. Sorry, their page is a bit. You see that the button squeezes in small. I don't know if you noticed. when I pressed on it, it's like the button went inside small. So that's like the press state. So when I press on it, it has that state. So once I click, right. So another example is this: an input field has a focus state. So you see the focus has the blue background. So it's telling me that right now I'm focused on the email input field. So once I just start typing, it goes into the email. If I go to password, see that password focus state has that blue thing there. You get it. So these are some of the states. So it's good to know these buttons or this component, this component, this is how they work. Right. So if you're a designer, sometimes you want to go into details and design these things. It's for beginners, you may not want to bother about it, but it's good to know how these buttons work. When you click on the button, it takes you to this page or it opens up something. Right? So there's a difference between the button and the link. So moving forward, we'll be looking at some of these components and see how they work. You get it. So I'll share this link with you. We may not be able to go through all this on the call because it will be lengthy because there are a number of components, right? So I'll share this with you so that you can also go through the various components and see how they work. Even when you are going through websites, right? You can equally just see how. Let me see if my Facebook. We can also note some of the components. I think that was Firefox. Right. So if I go into my Facebook, you notice that you see this input field, the way they have the search Facebook. When I bring the cursor here, it has a hover state. Right. So this is an input field. You want the person to type something. So you notice that it also has like some text here. So search Facebook. So when I click on it, you notice that now the cursor is indicating that. So I can just start typing. You get it. So these are some of the things. You notice even this component has overstate. So it gives me the impression that I can click. So once I just start hovering over it, you see the cursor has changed to the point at the hand. So it gives me the impression that I can click through these things. You get it. So it's good as designers. One thing I always recommend everyone or every designer who is starting out is try and understand how these components work so that it will help you, because when you are designing, you're going to give the work to a developer, and the developers, this is what they understand. They understand these components, right? So if you are able to effectively design these things for them, they will like, okay, they understand it. When you add a style guide, they'll know how to implement your designs. So it's good to know how these things work and when to use them. So one thing I'll do to help everybody is that moving forward after this call, every day, I will share one component, right? And I'll share how you can use it, right? So this is a radio button. I'm sure some of you may be familiar with it, but radio buttons are a selection control that often appears when users are asked to make decisions or select a choice from options. So maybe an example is maybe you want to, maybe you are designing a form, a web page, right? And you want the people to select maybe the agenda, right? So you want to design a radio button, right? Or you want them to select whether it's male, female, or other, right? So knowing how these components work, you know that, for something like this, I can use a radio button because radio buttons are components that help users choose between options. Right? So radio buttons, I can come here, Google material symbols. They have this as like a symbol or an icon, so you can easily do it. If you like, you can draw your own radio button, right? So I can also add, so this is when it's not selected and this is when it's selected, right? So let me close it. So I can put a radio button here and put the text male, right? And I also duplicate this and do female. You get it. So when I'm designing, then maybe I can put some label here that maybe select gender. You get it. So knowing that, for options, if you want to provide options for users to select from, right, they should select one. They should they can only select one. You can use what? Radio buttons. So it's good that as a designer, you know these things. You get it? So if you didn't know, oh, maybe you're designing something and they need to select one, but sometimes if you want them to select multiple options, right? There's a component for that. Those are checkboxes, right? So for a checkbox, you can select multiple options, but when you want the person to select only one option, you can use radio button. So it's good to know how these things work, right? It's really good. So moving forward, every day or maybe after every 2 days, I will share one component, right? So radio buttons, you this is how radio buttons work, right? So you see, so when you're designing stuff, you want to make some decisions, and so there's a difference between radio buttons and checkboxes. I just went through it. So you know this one, you want the person to select only one choice, right? But for checkboxes, you want them to select multiple. They can select. An example is maybe you want to ask people to select maybe their favorite colors, right? And they may have more than one favorite colors. So you don't want to use a radio button. You may want to use a checkbox, right? So instead of using radio buttons, you want to say, let's say a checkbox, which is this. This is the typical design for a checkbox. You get it? So these are some of the things. So it's good to know how these things work. So this is red, this is green, and this is blue, right? So let's say the person can easily check one of this, and so they can check either red or green. You get it? But with this one, they only need to select one. You see that you're male or female. You get it? So it's this. You can only make one selection. So this is how this is. So it's good to know this component and when to use it. Right. So we have less than 3 minutes left. So this is just an introduction to the web components and understanding how these things work. Right. So moving forward, since we'll be having the course probably every week, I'll try the components a lot, but I would like all of us to go through it. So maybe every day or every 2 days, I'll share one component. We can talk through it and at least understand how they work. Right. So I'm done for today. So we can have any questions, any thoughts, any feedback. Please can feel free to ask. We have less than 3 minutes. So
Hello, Graham.
the minutes to do that. Yes. Hello.
Yeah, please. What is the name of the plugin that you use to pick out the buttons?
The radio button. So material symbols, right? This is also for material is for Google, right? So they have some icons. So you can let me open it up. So I think it's material. It's the same as material icons, but there's a little difference in it. So if you go to material icons, so it's for Google. So it's called fonts.google. So it has all the icons here. So they equally have a plugin, right? So if you're working in Figma, you can easily use this. You can use the plugin, but if you want to make reference to it on the web, you can just come here, the same thing here. So with the symbols, right, it helps you customize these things, right? If you want to control the weight, if you look at the weight carefully, you can take this, right? If I increase the weight, you see that it's becoming big, small, you can reduce it, right? So that's the advantage of using the symbols to the icons. They are practically the same, but it's just the customization, right? So I prefer to use the symbols instead of the icons.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Any other question? We have less than a minute. Or any feedback? How was today's session? Anything we can improve upon?